ルフィ、私はあなたの決定に従うけど、海賊の同盟には裏切りがつきものよ。人を信じすぎるあなたには不向きかもしれない。
え、お前裏切んのか？
いや。やろな！ちった疑え！
Hello everyone and welcome to another video. This time we are here for the blue-purple Sanji Deck Tech. So we've been waiting for this one for a bit and I'm kind of excited to get into it. Before we get too much into it though, remember that if any of these cards are ones that you wanted to pick up, consider using my affiliate link in the description. It really helps the channel, and yeah, if you're going to buy the cards, might as well. Moving on to the first topic here, we have the leader. This leader Sanji, he is a 5,000 power, 4 life leader who is blue and purple and with the strike attribute. And he has 2 abilities. The first one being activate main, once per turn, Dawn -1, activate up to 1 of your Straw Hat crew type events with a base cost of 3 or less from your hand. And his next ability is when attacking, if the number of Dawn cards on your field is equal to or less than the number on your opponent's field, add up to 1 Dawn card from your Dawn deck and rest it. So pros to this guy. He is one of the first things you'll see people kind of point out is he is a purple Straw Hat, which is a very well supported archetype. This leader isn't a perfect fit for the rest of the archetype, but it seems to be a pretty consistently supported archetype, which means that upgrades to purple Straw Hats in the future we'll get to take advantage of. Most notable from that set, or from that archetype, is Gum Gum Giant. Super important card in the meta. Arguably the strongest defensive card you can play in the game. And I think that that's probably a fair claim. The next thing is he has his 2 abilities both offer free value. The when attacking lets you catch up in Dawn for free without doing anything that you wouldn't otherwise be doing, but it also essentially makes your first ability have no cost. So in a turn where nothing else is going on, you can just use your first ability, go Dawn -1, and then when you attack, you'll get that Dawn right back. So you'll notice when you're playing this deck that oftentimes you will use that, spend some Dawn, do a Dawn minus on that spent Dawn, use one of your events, and then swing with your lead, and that'll just be a very common play pattern. The other thing that you can use the second ability for is if you have other Dawn minus things in your deck. And I'll go into some of that stuff when we get into individual card discussions. But for the most part, you're going to be using it on your first leader ability. But just be aware that it does work really nicely with other Dawn -1 type effects that you could play in the deck. Cons to this leader. Being a 4 life leader is definitely a big downside, especially because your leader abilities, while they're free and they get you kind of value without having to invest much in them, the abilities aren't necessarily backbreakingly strong. So you really need to kind of maximize that ability to make up for the fact that you're missing out on a life. Another con to this deck is because there is a pretty high event focus in this deck, your deck slots can get really cramped. Just because you want to include enough events to make his first ability usable. That's another reason why I would encourage you to look out for good Dawn -1 abilities so that you can still get value out of his second ability even when you are not trying to maximize the first. So that is kind of our leader, and we'll kind of jump straight into the cards. One thing I am trying out for this deck tech, and probably for future ones if it works out, so please do comment in the comment section whether or not you like this new thing. But I wanted to identify each card with kind of some lingo so that you can kind of identify more quickly which are the cards that are worth really looking at, which are the ones that you might want to look at if you're struggling with a particular matchup, which are the ones that might take you in a completely different direction, and which ones are ones just to avoid. So this check mark will be the core cards. So these are the cards that should start in your initial list most of the time, and your main game plan for the deck is usually going to be one of these core cards, and the other core cards are going to be cards that support them. Tech cards with this gear are cards that are particularly good in certain matchups, but not necessarily all. So these would be your ways of fine-tuning for a particular meta that you're expecting. If you're expecting more aggro, you can do some more removal. If you're expecting more big bodies, you can tech into more defense. Spicy cards with this pepper here are cards that really don't necessarily fit with the core game plan, but do open up new avenues to play the deck and are worth investigating, but with the acknowledgement that they might not work as good as the core game plan. And then the no-go cards, these are ones that I would just avoid, and they're going to be, there's just better options for if they do something that is useful, or they're actively bad. So those are the categories. For Sanji, since he is focused on events and Straw Hat events in particular, I decided I'm going to go through all of the Straw Hat events, and then I'll get into the remaining core cards that aren't events after that. So with that in mind, let's hop into the first card we have here is Conqueror. It is a 1-cost event with main if your leader is Sanji, draw 1 card. And then counter, if you have 4 or more events in your trash, up to one of your leaders gains 4,000 power during his turn. So this one fits the mold of the modal events that we've seen for a bunch of other characters, but it only works in Sanji, and it really kind of incentivizes you to stick with the game plan of just play events and get them into the yard. Pros to this one, it is both flexible and that you can always just cycle it, and it's pretty cheap as a defensive option, especially in the context of holding up for Gum Gum Giant. Cons, though, is it can't protect your characters. One of the things that I've noticed playing this deck is that sometimes you will find yourself in a spot where you need to swing with one of your characters, and you won't have a good way of protecting it because events require you hold up Dawn, and that's not always a viable option. And even when you can hold up Dawn, this Conqueror is not going to be able to protect them. So that's the biggest downside to this card. Moving on to the next one, we have Boof Burst. This is another core card. It is a 3-cost event with main if your leader is multicolored. Choose 1. Either return up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 4 or less to the owner's hand, or if you have 6 or less cards in hand, draw a card. This is probably the most often used card with your leader ability when you have it. It is very strong. Being able to use this very meaningfully 3 Dawn worth of cost for a simple Dawn -1 is really strong. It can be removal in a pinch, but you will almost always use it for the card draw, just so that you can continue to have defenses up in the future. Cons to this one, it doesn't have a counter or a trigger, so there will be in-game situations where you have a good number of cards and some in life, and you may brick out. So make sure that you play a little bit more defensively and don't rely on cards out of life, because there are several of the cards in this category that have no counter, have no trigger, and are bricks in those situations where your opponent tries to go for game early. So just something to keep in mind. Next card we have here, this one's a little bit core, a little bit tech. I would not suggest running this one at 4 of. It's usually okay to include the first one. The second one is probably fine as well, but the third and fourth ones you definitely want to consider based on your matchups. This one is Broquette Blow, which is a 3-cost event with main. If the number of Dawn cards on your field is equal to or less than the number on your opponent's field, draw 1 card. Then give up to one of your opponent's characters minus 3,000 power during this turn. So this is particularly good against certain threats. 8-cost Kid comes to mind, which, although a lot less uncommon nowadays, is still a thing. It's also good at getting rid of characters who've already swung. Maybe they were a rusher or otherwise kind of used an ability or something like that. These can be great at getting around their kind of higher stat lines and getting through. And then also, because it just draws a card, it's often fine to just use your Dawn -1 and not use the -3000 power, just to draw the card. Cons on this one, just like with Boo First, there's no counter on it. Sometimes it's brick in late game, and because it's 3 cost, you can't just throw it out without thinking about it, especially because if you have both First and this in hand, it may be correct to use the Boo First and then be stuck with this as a brick for a turn. So just something to keep in mind of. I would not recommend going all the way up to 4, but it is a viable card if you find a meta that needs it. Next up, we have another core card. This is going to be one of the most important ones, or most common ones to see out of 4 of. This is Luffy is the man who will become the king of the pirates, which is a 1-cost event with main. If your leader is Sanji, look at the top 3 cards of your deck and add 1 to your hand, then place the rest on the bottom in any order. Important to note here, unlike with most searchers, you do not have to show your opponent what you got, so you get to preserve that mysterious information there. This card will very frequently get used as soon as you draw it, and this is the kind of card that lets you find the specific tech cards that you need. Cons to this, just like for the other ones, if you see it at the wrong time, it is a brick, and you won't be able to get it out of your hand in time. So just things to keep in mind, but I almost would guarantee that this should be a 4 of in whatever list you're running. Moving on to the next one, we have a tech card here in a 1-cost Gum Gum King Cobra. It is a counter event with up to 1 of your leader or character cards gains 2000 power during this battle. Then if you have 4 or less cards in your hand, that card gains an additional 2000 power during this battle. So this is a pretty strong defensive option. It allows you to protect characters, unlike Conqueror, for that same cost, which can be good. The cons to it, though, is the maximum value of getting that 4K out of it isn't always achievable, because you, as playing a bunch of events, will sometimes be stuck with several cards in hand, and it may not be super easy to get down to that 4 cards or less in hand. That said, defending characters can be quite good, and this also has a trigger, which, although kind of minor, can be the difference against a deck like maybe O'Reilly, where you can kind of steal one of their attackers in the late game. So overall, this is a pretty good card, but it's got a lot of competition, so I added it as tech for those reasons. Next up, we have another core card. This one is usually going to be 4, but it would definitely be one of the cards that you could consider trimming on if you have enough other events. It is a 1-cost Let's Crash This Wedding, which has a main. If your leader is multicolored, look at top 5 cards from your deck, reveal up to 1 Straw Hat Crew type card other than Let's Crash This Wedding, and add it to your hand. Then place the rest at the bottom of your deck in any order. And then it also has Trigger, activate this card's main ability. So pros to this one: 1-cost searcher events are great in this deck. It helps you find what you need a lot of the time. There are a couple key cards that it can't find, but a good number of other cards, most notably Gum Gum Giant and our Sanji, who we'll get into later, are both Straw Hat cards and are exactly the kinds of things that you want to be searching for. Also, at 1 cost, it's a great card to use to get a Dawn rested, so that you can Dawn minus on a rested Dawn and get the most value out of the leader ability. Having Trigger is also great, and then it means it's a lot less of a brick in the late game situations, because if you hit it in Trigger, you just get to get the ability and usually find a 2K off of it. Cons to this one, though: it can't find Reiju, which is a really important card for the deck, and it can't find some of your other tech options, notably your other top-end cards sometimes. So just things to keep in mind when you are looking at this deck, but I do think that this one is probably a core card, just because your deck gets to be functionally small, meaning you don't really need to run as many copies of things because of the amount of searches you have. Moving on to the next one. This is another core card, I think, but definitely in the approaching a tech card, because it doesn't work in every situation. This is the 3-cost Gum Gum Jet Culvern. It has main up to 1 of your opponent's characters with a base cost of 4 or less at the bottom of the owner's deck. and then it has a trigger with place up to one character with a cost of 1 or less at the bottom of the owner's deck. So this one is great against aggro, and most decks do have at least one base 4 cost. So it's not frequently dead, but if you run too many of them, you can outnumber essentially the number of targets in the opponent's deck. So that's one of the big cons, is if you have too many of them, they become bricks in the late game. They have a weak trigger, so that doesn't get out for free. And the base cost of 4 is a little bit low. There are some really important cards at 5 that you'd really love to hit, but you can't with this card. So this one probably makes the 1, 2, maybe even 3 in the average deck, but probably is rarely going to make it all the way up to 4 unless you're facing all aggro decks like Rayleigh. Moving on to the next one. This is the first one I would not recommend. I'm including this one for for completion's sake on the Straw Hat Crew events. This is Gear 2. It is a 1-cost event. With main, you may rest 2 of your Dawn cards. If your leader's colors include blue, add up to 1 Dawn card from your Dawn deck and rest it. And then counter up to one of your leaders gains plus 3,000 during this turn. So we are a purple and blue leader, so you can use the main event piece. But this frequently is a deck that doesn't want to ramp, so keep that in mind. Other things to note: if you try to use this off of your leader ability, you still have to rest 2 Dawn for it. And when you're Dawn minusing to get 1 Dawn back, that's kind of twiddling your thumbs. They're not really doing anything like that. And notably, even when it's in its best situation where you're using it for counter, it can't protect characters, which is a pretty big one. So with all those said, this is a great card for a lot of other blue-purple decks, but specifically for Sanji, I don't think that it is the right place to be. So this will be the first no-go. Next up is another no-go. This one is the 2-cost event, that time when your friend's dreams are laughed at. And this one has counter this turn. When one of your characters would be KO'd in battle, you may instead discard 1 card from your hand, and then it has a trigger of draw 1 card. So pros to this one can fully protect your board from your opponents, effectively making any swing counterable with a 1k or even a brick. So that's a pretty reasonable amount of protection. The downside to it, though, is most of the characters that we're really interested in the deck are the kinds of characters who you don't need the protection ability as much. They'll stick either by being large or by having their own protection. And this being a counter event that makes you hold up 2 can really be kind of counterproductive. So another card I would categorize as no-go. After that, we have a Searcher event. These are usually pretty good, but this particular one doesn't quite line up with Sanji, at least at this point. There's a world in the future where it does. But it is a 1-cost event with Follow Me and I Will Guide You. And it has main, look at the top 5 cards from the top of your deck, reveal up to 1 Dressrosa type character card and add it to your hand, then place the rest at the bottom of your deck in any order. And trigger, activate this card's main effect. So pros to it, you can find the blue Cavendish, I think is probably the most relevant card that you could find. But that's really the main card that you'd be searching for, which is really kind of awkward for the deck because that's not worth running. So a really good card if blue or purple Dressrosa ever gets further support, but something that you'll need to wait for that to happen before this card becomes relevant. Moving on to the next one. This one's a bit of a tech card. It's not great, but there are some niche situations where it works, notably against chump blockers or against weenie aggro. You could use this one. It is the 3-cost event, Special Long Range Attack Bagworm. With main, draw 1 card, then return up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 2 or less to the owner's hand. And then it has a trigger with return up to 1 character with a cost of 2 or less to its owner's hand. So this one is kind of niche, like I said. There aren't necessarily a lot of really important targets that you need to hit it to. That said, it always draws the card, so there's always some decent ability there. Cons to this one, it's really mostly just usable off of leader ability. I don't think I'd ever want to play 3 for this. And if you have to use leader ability to use this one, then you're competing with other 3-drops. So I think the meta would need to be pretty specific to use this one. But it does have enough going in its favor to where I put it as tech card instead of as a no-go. Next up, we have another tech card here in the Gum Gum Lightning. It's a 2-cost event, Gum Gum Lightning with main Dawn -2, KO up to one of your opponent's characters with 6,000 power or less. And then trigger, add up to 1 Dawn card from your Dawn deck and set it as active. So this is a pretty solid removal option. There's a lot of things that you can hit that are important that get hit with this. Cons on it, though, is it's really harsh on your Dawn. If you're using it off of leader ability, it's Dawn -3 effectively, which sometimes in a pinch is exactly what you need, especially if you've already spent that Dawn. But it's definitely not a trivial cost to ignore. The trigger can be useful, especially if you are loading your deck up with more of these expensive Dawn costs. But otherwise, I think this one is kind of a 1 or 2 of, just as a way of getting past very specific things that you might not be able to get around otherwise. So one to keep in mind, but probably not going to see play in most lists. Next up, we have, this is probably the most important card in the archetype, the 1-cost Gum Gum Giant. It's got counter, Dawn -2. You may trash 1 card from your hand. If your leader has a Straw Hat Crew type, up to one of your leader or characters gains plus 4,000 power during this battle, and then draw 2 cards. Like I mentioned earlier, this is probably the most effective defensive card in the entire game. It cycles bricks, it draws you cards and replaces itself. It defends leaders and characters. The only real con to it is it can be harsh on your Dawn. And unlike with a lot of other Purple Straw Hat leaders, you don't actively ramp that much in this deck. So you're usually using Gum Gum Giants earlier in the game, and this is the kind of card that would maybe preventing you from getting to 10, which isn't unreasonable in this deck, but it is definitely a lot harder cost than it is in like what Blue Purple Luffy was before, or Red Purple Luffy, or any of the other real purple Straw Hat cards. But 100% you should be running 4 of this card. Worst case, you use Gum Gum Giant to pitch a different Gum Gum Giant. There is almost no reason not to be running all 4 of these. Until they print something that specifically counterplays this card, you should probably be running 4. Moving on to the next one. We have Gum Gum Jump Rope, which is a 2-cost event with main Dawn -2. Rest up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 5 or less, then draw 1 card. So this one works really similar to Gum Gum Lightning. It has the same trigger and everything. This one is going to be most important at getting around 5-cost blockers that have KO protection or have other kind of protection from getting them removed from the board, which it feels more niche, but this one also lets you go into starve mode a little bit better with your opponent by letting you rest their characters and then swing at them. Cons, the same as with Gum Gum Lightning. This one's really kind of harsh on your Dawn. So make sure you don't use these ones too early and miss out on the ability to play the game in the late game. Next up, we have Gum Gum Champion Rifle, which is a 1-cost event with counter. If your leader has the Impel Down type, up to one of your leaders or characters gains 2,000 power during the turn. Then your opponent returns one of their active characters to the owner hand. Super strong ability, completely useless in this leader. It also has a counter of return up to 1 character with a cost of 3 or less in the bottom of the owner's deck. That's literally the only piece of this card that actually has text in this leader. Just don't avoid this card. It's here only for completion. Next, another no-go card. This one, I don't know what any deck that would want to use this one. I'm actually really excited for the possibilities that they print something that this is good in. But it is Sorry, I'm a Goner, which is a 1-cost event with counter. Reveal 1 card from the top of your deck. If the revealed card has a cost of 4 or more, return up to 1 of your characters to the owner's hand, then place the revealed card at the bottom of your deck. Then as a trigger with return up to 1 character with a cost of 8 or less to its owner's hand. So, pros to it, I guess, is that you could reuse a searcher or something like that, and you could, in theory, turn off Green Zoro's leader ability. Super niche at that, because it's not even guaranteed. You have to know that the top card of your deck is 4 cost or more. So effectively, it doesn't really do anything, but it does have a super strong trigger. So if there's ever a world where we get to see a way to stack this as a trigger, sure, go right ahead. But in the current game, completely ignore this card. Next up, we have our first spicy card, the Peppers. We have the I Would Never Doubt a Woman's Tears, a 1-cost event with main. Up to 1 of your leaders or characters gains plus 1,000 for the turn. Then reveal the top card of your deck and put up to 1 2-cost character into play and put the rest on the top or bottom, or on the top or bottom. I need to double check because this is a translation error that I think. I think it only goes to the bottom of your deck. And then trigger, put up to 1 2-cost character from your hand into play. So pros to this one, you get a free 2-cost body if you know that it's there. So that's something you could build around. Cons to it, you really have to build around it. I don't think that this card is strictly unplayable, but it is the kind of card that makes you invest in it so heavily that if the rest of the cards that you have to play to make it work aren't good enough, then this card is dragged down as a result. Definitely one that I would be watching because I think that it's been around for a while. I keep watching it, and I hope that someday we actually get to see the deck that really wants this. Moving on to the next one, another spicy card. Almost the same text. This time, though, it is Parage Shot on a 1-cost counter event that gives up to 1 of your leaders or characters plus 2,000 for the battle. Then you reveal the top of your deck, and if it's a 2-cost, you can play it. Again, essentially the same pros and cons as the previous one, except this one would not be usable with your leader ability for Sanji, but would act as a defensive card. So it's a trade-off there. Moving on to the next one. This is the 1-cost event, Usopp's Rubber Band of Doom. This is a card that if you've ever played Nami, this is really familiar to you. It is a counter event with up to 1 of your leaders or characters gains 2,000 power in this turn. Then you may trash the top card of your deck. I think the only situation I would consider this is if you're really trying to get cards into your trash to get your Sanji's big. Cons to this, it is pretty weak compared to a lot of other defensive options at its cost, and most of the time you're just going to pick one of those options because the extra trash card is probably not going to be worth it on average. Next we have Gum Gum Giant Gavel. Again, same kind of upsides as Usopp's Rubber Band. It is a 1-cost event with counter. You may trash 1 card from your hand. Up to 1 of your leaders gains 4,000 power during this turn. Then you may trash the top 2 cards of your deck. So this is essentially for 1 cost getting to use 2 Rubber Bands of Doom. This one's trigger is return up to 1 character with a cost of 4 or less to its owner's hand. That's a pretty solid trigger. But overall, same as with Usopp's Rubber Band, it is not great compared to other defensive events that are already in the deck. But in a world where you really want to get stuff in the trash, there is a world where it could make sense. Moving on to the next one, I would consider this one a core. It is the 0-cost event with counter. You may trash 1 card from your hand, your leader, or up to 1 of your characters gains plus 3,000 power during the battle. And then trigger up to 1 of your return up to 1 character with a cost of 2 or less to its owner's hand. And that's Gum Gum Rain. Pros of this one, the deck does tend to run quite a few bricks, so this is great at getting rid of bricks that just have no counter, events that you haven't found use for. It costs no Dawn, which is really important. Again, it is weak compared to some of the 1-cost 4Ks because you have to also discard for this, but that can be a benefit, especially if you need to get multiple events into the trash to power up a Sanji or something like that. It can really be relevant. So this one I would include in some number to kind of mitigate the number of bricks in the deck, but maybe not all of them. With that in mind, the other card with essentially the same text, just with a different trigger, is Gum Gum Jet Gatling. Its trigger is add up to 1 Dawn card from your Dawn deck and set is active. I would consider this just to be, if you are running all 4 of your Gum Gum Rains and you want more of the 0 cost event, you have access to it here. But I would probably run Gum Gum Rain first because the trigger is more relevant for the deck. So I would only consider this tech card because it's going to just be extra copies of the blue one. Moving on to other events. These are ones that cost more than 3, so they're not eligible for Sanji's leader ability. I just wanted to go through some of those. We have the 6 cost Gum Gum Red Rock with main, place up to 1 character at the bottom of its owner's deck. Just no questions asked, removal. It also has a trigger with place 1 character with a cost of 4 or less on the bottom of the deck, which is a strong trigger. Pros to this card, just gets rid of things. No questions asked. It's not necessarily super efficient at it, but it will get rid of near about anything you want. It does have a strong trigger. It is a Straw Hat Crew type card, so it's searchable with your searcher events. Cons to it, like I said, it's not super efficient. You're usually not getting a super big discount. Luckily, 6 cost does fit pretty nicely with, you play this, you play Sanji, who we'll get into later, and then you still have 1 up for Gum Gum Giant. And definitely a card that you don't want to see a lot of because it's both inefficient. You can't use 2 of them in a turn, for example. So if you draw the second one, you're guaranteed to hold on to 1 as a brick for at least a turn. But yeah, great card. I would include it in the core just because finding a way to get around whatever pesky thing that they have is really important. But too many of them is probably too much. Moving on, we have another Straw Hat event. This is the 4 cost 3,000 Worlds with main, place up to 1 character with a cost of 5 or less at the bottom of its owner's deck, and a trigger of place up to 1 character with a cost of 3 or less at the bottom of its owner's deck. Pros to this one, it does hit a lot of key targets and usually pretty efficiently. 4 is not so much to where it kind of shuts down your turn. It's got a pretty decent trigger and is searchable. Cons, though, is it'll never be able to hit the really big cards. So if you need something that does that, you can't use this as a substitute for Red Rock. And just like with Red Rock, can be bricky in multiples, so be careful how many you put in. Next up, we have Slave Arrow. This is the first one we have that is not Straw Hat Crew type. It's a 1 cost event with counter. You may return 1 of your characters with a cost of 2 or more to its owner's hand. And then up to 1 of your leaders or characters gains plus 4,000 power during this battle. And then it has a trigger of draw 2 cards and place 2 cards from your hand at the bottom of your deck in any order. And this one is almost exclusively for messing up Green Zoro. So if your opponent is resting 1 of your guys and going to swing into it, you can use this to pick that guy up. Zoro does not complete a battle, so he cannot restand. And the leader ability is essentially nullified in that situation. It's super effective if you are able to get a 2K down and use this. But sometimes even just bouncing a Reiju or a Sanji to prevent Zoro from swinging that second time can be really helpful. Cons to that, you need to be playing 2 cost characters that want to be returned to hand for it to be at maximum value. Because if you have to set yourself back by playing out the Sanji multiple turns in a row, that can be pretty harmful to your game plan, especially because while Zoro is losing out on their leader ability, they are still usually developing a board when they do that. So you definitely ideally want to have some cards that like to be bounced to hand in your deck when that happens. Moving on to what I believe is the last event that we're looking at, we have the 2 cost Slow Beam Sword, which is a counter event with Dawn -1. Up to 1 of your leader or characters gains plus 2,000 power during this battle, then rest up to 1 of your opponent's characters. And then it has a trigger of add 1 Dawn from your Dawn deck and set it as active. So the pros to this one is it is a super strong card at blowing out the opponent. Opponents will not play around this, and you will be able to get some wins off of it. The part that's tough on it is holding up 2 Dawn can be tricky to do. And even if you get that blowout, you are stuck with only a 2 plus 2,000 power event on 2 Dawn, which can be pretty dangerous, because that means that you're investing a card for not necessarily a whole lot of value and the extra Dawn. That said, if you're going to put this one in, I guarantee that it will win you a game or two, especially if you can draw into it and not reveal that you have it to your opponent. So searching this one is in some sense detrimental, because if they know that it's there, they can play around it significantly better. Now we'll move on to the characters. So the characters are going to be the ways you win the game, where all the events were the ways that you either power up your characters or you otherwise set up for in-game, defend yourself, and so on. All right, so the first character we're going to go over here is the 3-cost Sanji. He's got 3-cost, 5,000 power, strike attribute. And this character gains 1,000 power for every 5 events in your trash. If this character will be removed from the field by your opponent's effects, you may return 1 Dawn from your field to your Dawn deck instead. Pros of this guy: he is very sticky. It is hard for your opponents to remove him from the board outside of combat. And as he is a scaling threat who gets big into the late game, he can sometimes be hard to remove by combat as well. Luckily, he is quite searchable in this deck, and this is kind of your core win condition for the deck. It doesn't work into every matchup, and it doesn't have counter, which is unfortunate, but I think that most of the time you are playing around this as your win condition. He can be particularly weak into Zoro, so make sure that you're not holding on to too many of these against Zoro. And he does require the deck building investment. You got to run a lot of events to make him at his full power, but he is quite effective when he is supported. Moving on to the next one, this is another core card here. We have the 4-cost, 5,000 power special attribute Reiju, who has 1,000 counter, and if you have 4 or more events in your trash, this character gains plus 2,000 power and plus 5 cost, which is immense amount of value for doing what your deck is likely already trying to do. And then it has blocker. So this one can be a threat and is an early big blocker if you get a little lucky with your draws. So definitely one of the cards that you are building your deck around and trying to get into a good position. Cons of this one: it does require a kind of event heavy hand to come online too early. If you have to cast this on your 6th Dawn turn, then this is a lot less effective than when you can get those kind of really nice hands that let it come online earlier. And then the 7-cost or 7,000 power is not enough to be a solo threat. So it's the kind of card that's really good at linking you into the end game, but is not really good at being your finisher. So keep that in mind. It is exceptionally good, but it can't win the game on its own. And you will need to find room for other cards to go with it, which paired with the 4 events or more in your trash thing can be kind of difficult because your deck gets cramped with all those events. Moving on to the next one. I don't know exactly the correct number on this, but I feel like more than one is correct. We have the 6-cost, 7,000 power strike, 0 counter Monkey D. Luffy, who has on play and when attacking, Dawn -2. If your leader is multicolored and your opponent has 5 or more Dawn cards on their field, your Straw Hat Crew type leader's base power becomes 7,000 until the end of your opponent's next end phase. Pros to this one: this is both an offensive and defensive threat, reasonably searchable with some of our event searchers, and it represents just kind of must answer threat. A lot easier to answer in this deck than it is in some other decks who get to also increase its cost, but still a very solid card in this deck. Cons to this one: it can be pretty oppressive on your Dawn. So it's one that you have to be aware of and probably play accordingly into this card kind of draining your Dawn and making it hard for you to get up to the 8, 9, 10 Dawn. Oftentimes it means skipping the event mode of your leader ability, just so that you can kind of keep the dawn flowing and increasing. But that said, this going to 7k on your turn can be really important against the 6k leaders. So just something to keep in mind. Next up, there's another core one. This is the 6 cost 7,000 power strike 1k counter Jozu. He has on play, you may return one of your characters other than this character to the owner's hand, and then return up to one character with a cost of 6 or less to its owner's hand. This is probably the most efficient removal card in the game for what the targets that it can hit, at the expense of sticking a small character that you want back in your hand early. If you can't stick a character early, this guy's becomes significantly less impressive, so keep that in mind. It's definitely the kind of card that you have to kind of play to as you're out, and sometimes your opponent can kind of punish you by kind of removing those guys and whatnot. But when he works, he does work well. I would definitely consider this one pretty core, especially if you take the time to build around it. Next up, we have our Searcher, who is a 1 cost 2,000 power 1k counter Charlotte Pudding. With on play, look at the top 4 cards of your deck, reveal up to 1 Sanji or event card and add it to your hand, then place the rest at the bottom of your deck in any order. Oftentimes Sanji is the kind of card you're looking for, or an event to keep digging further. It's also a card that's really good with Jozu, kind of the ideal card to pick up with Jozu. Cons to it, though, it can't find the other top end cards, so you can't use it to find your Jozu. And so in matchups where Sanji's not a great matchup thing, like into Zora, this can be a lot less strong. But I think overall it's still quite good in its synergy with Jozu. Moving on to the next one, we have the Kaya, who's a 1 cost 0 power 2,000 counter on play. Draw up to 2 cards and trash 2 cards from your hand. So this one cycles bricks out of your hand. This deck does run quite a few bricks, and oftentimes you will need to find something to add to the board early. And Kaya kind of lets you get rid of the cards that are harder to use in the early game to find cards that you can. Also has a really good synergy with Jozu. You use it early to fix your hand, then play a Jozu, pick it back up, and then you can use it for countering. Cons to it, though, it'll always be card disadvantage if you don't find the Jozu, because you are losing the 2k out of hand to fix the other cards. That said, though, due to its synergy with Jozu, this is almost certainly a core card. Next up, we have the Usohachi. He's a 3 cost 3,000 power ranged character with counter 2,000. And on play, if you have 8 or more Dawn, rest up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 5 or less. This is a great card for pushing for in-game. It is moderately searchable, being a Straw Hat Crew. The biggest downside to it is in this deck in particular, if you have to start using Gum Gum Giants early, there may be turns in the late game where you would want to use it where you're not at 8 Dawn at the beginning of the turn. So just keep that in mind, that it can get randomly turned off at times that are inconvenient. Otherwise, I think it's a really solid card to have at least a couple copies of as an out to really blocker-centric decks. Moving on, we have the 6 cost 6,000 power strike 2k counter Sanji. If the number of Dawn cards on your field is at least 2 less than the number of on your opponent's field, give this card in your hand -3 cost, and then it has blocker. So this one is nice in that it is searchable by the pudding. It can be pretty easy to get that 2 less on your opponent so that you can play it out for 3, which makes it quite strong. And then when it's on the field, it's always a 6, which means that it can be a little bit hard for opponents to interact with. A lot of stuff deals with less than 5. Him being a 6 can help with that. Occasionally, though, he can be hard to cast because this deck doesn't try to go too low on Dawn. Outside of maybe Gum Gum Giant turns, especially if you use those early, then you can have situations where the Sanji comes out. But a lot of times he'll just be a 2k that's searchable, which is a fine baseline. Moving on to one of our more important kind of non-game plan cards, we have this 4-cost Pudding, who's got 4,000 power, wisdom attribute, 1k counter, and on play, your opponent returns all the cards in their hand to their deck and shuffles it. Then your opponent draws 5 cards. This card cannot be replaced for what it does. So if there's a time in the meta where people are hoarding their cards in hand, this card is always going to be good. Cons to it, though, if your opponents aren't playing recklessly with the cards in hand, they won't get got by this, and then it just turns into a 1k, which can be pretty detrimental. I think this card is, the first copy is useful, even just using it for counter to put the Fear of God in your opponent, so that they counter as if you have it, can be useful. But otherwise, great card. If you ever get it off, it will win you games. Next, getting into some tech options for alternative top-end cards. First one we have here is the 7-cost 8,000 power / Odin, who has 0 counter. And if this character would be removed from the field by your opponent's effects, you may instead trash 2 cards from your hand, and then activate main once per turn. You may rest 3 of your Dawn cards and return 1 of your characters other than this to your hand. Set this card as active. So it is a hard to remove character, and because of the double swing that he enables, he can win the game quickly. So if you find yourself needing to pivot and end a game quickly before your defenses run out, this one is great at doing that. Cons to this one, the main one being that I think that Jozu is probably the more reliable answer as a top-end card. And these 2 cards don't really play nicely together because they're both competing for the kind of cards that you would play out to bounce. So definitely consider that. You will often not be able to kind of ram both of them because you will run out of stuff to bounce back to hand. But otherwise, a definitely solid option if you're looking for alternative top ends. Next up, this one is a little more speculative. This is similar to how Beer Luffy does. It is less punishing on your Dawn curve, but as a downside to that, it is a little bit more expensive to get online and a little bit more less searchable. But this is the 7-cost 8,000 power, no counter, Eustace Captain Kidd. And he has on play and when attacking, Dawn -1, up to one of your leaders gains 1,000 power until the start of your next turn. So it looks very similar to how the Beer Luffy does. It's just kind of a trade-off one. Moving on to other top-end options, we have the 8-cost 8,000 power strike 0 counter Luffy. He has Rush, and when attacking, you may trash 1 card from your hand, return up to 1 character with a cost of 4 or less to the owner's hand, then give up to 1 rested on to your leader or one of your characters. So the combination of Rush and a 4-cost removal can be the kind of card that uniquely ends a game by getting rid of a blocker and getting in for a 9k swing. Cons to this one, though, it is a bit more expensive at 8 in a deck that sometimes doesn't get that high. So just be aware that you can't run too many of these cards unless you adjust your game plan to always get to that 8 and 9 Dawn turns. Next up, we have another secret Luffy. This one is the 9-cost 10,000 power strike, no counter Luffy. With on play, you may return 1 or more Dawn cards from your field to your Dawn deck. Draw 1 card, then this character gains Rush during this turn. This one trades compared to the last one. You get a bigger body. You do not get removal, but you do get to draw a card, so it can be a little more defensive. This is the card that you want to stick to the board more than the 8-cost one, whereas the 8-cost one is better at finishing. This one is better at staying on board. Cons to this one is it's even more expensive at 9 cost, so you definitely have to tailor your gameplay to make sure that you're getting to that Dawn, that 9 Dawn turn, or 9 Dawn point of the game. Next up, we have the 6-cost 7,000 power strike Luffy with no counter. If your leader is multicolored and your opponent has 5 or more Dawn cards on the field, this character gains Rush. You're noticing a theme here with all these Rush Luffys. It also has, when attacking once per turn, return 2 of your active Dawn cards from your Dawn deck. Set this character as active, then add the top card of your life to your hand. So pros of this one, this is that same rush ability, but much easier on the Dawn cost. Double swing, even active, if you wait a little bit longer and have some extra active Dawn sitting around. Cons to this one, you do have to take a life, so it's definitely in the more go for game setting. Which, if you are just trying to get the double swing, Odin is probably the safer card to go with, because this one is a lot more all in. But this one has rush, whereas Odin does not. So this one has a little bit more surprise factor. I think this is probably best as a 1 of, maybe a 2 of, as just kind of a surprise card to catch your opponents off guard, rather than your main win conditions in the deck. Moving on, we have yet another top-end option. We have the 7-cost, 7,000 power strike attribute Sanji, who has 1,000 counter, and on play, you may return 1 or more Dawn cards from your field to your Dawn deck. This character gains rush during this turn, then rest up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 6 or less. So this one is rush like the 8-cost Luffy. It is a searchable option, because the pudding can search for Sanjis. It has a 1k counter. Acts as a pretty effective board control option, resting a 6 cost. Cons to it, though, it is a little less threatening than some of the other options. It's pretty comparable to the Rush Blue Luffy. But as far as bodies go, if you aren't ending the game with it, you're probably going to be more likely to lose it to an opponent's swing back into it, which is a very real concern with your top end, because a lot of your other cards are not going to be easily removed from the field, so your opponents will put a lot of extra pressure on this guy as a result. Moving on to maybe some tech 2Ks, we have this 3-cost, 4,000 power strike Sanji with 2,000 counter. Activate main, you may place this card in your trash, look at the top 5 from your deck, then place them at the top or bottom of your deck in your preferred order. Main pros to this is the searchable 2Ks. Its con, though, is it's not necessarily a super effective it's not a super effective ability, and it is not a Straw Hat Crew type thing, so it is a little less searchable than some of the other ones. It's still searchable by pudding, but not by Let's Crash This Wedding. So definitely things to balance out. I think if you find ways to use the ability to where you can stack the top, this one gains some advantage there, but those situations kind of have to be built around in the rest of the deck. Next up, we have this 1-cost, 1,000 power Slash Carne, who has 1,000 counter, and if you have 4 or more events in your trash, this character gains blocker. The biggest upside to this one is it helps protect your board from Zoro. Because Zoro can only swing at characters on their first swing, if you can redirect them into this Carne, you kind of neutralize their leader ability to remove stuff. Cons, though, is sometimes it can be a little awkward to play in the early game because it'll probably get rested and swung into by a searcher or something like that if you don't have it set up early in those events ready to go. So definitely a pretty strong tech option. I would even consider running a couple copies to tech into Zoro. Not necessarily as your first pick, but definitely keep this one in mind as a pretty effective way of dealing with Zoro early. Next up, we'll get into some spicy cards. This spicy list here, I think, is going to focus a lot more on decks where you're not as focused on the Sanji character, and you focus a lot more on using other Dawn minus abilities in your deck to work with your leader ability rather than the events. So it's definitely a different style of deck, and I don't know if it's going to work out. This is kind of the thing that I'm noodling on, of whether or not it can make it work. But this Frankie is a 3-cost, 4,000 power strike character with counter 1,000, and he has on play when attacking. If your leader has the Straw Hat Crew type and the number of Dawn cards on the board are equal to or less than your opponent's, set up to 1 Dawn from your Dawn deck as rested. So this works really good with cards like Gum Lightning, or if you are running some of the other cards that we'll get into shortly, as just ways of returning, essentially spending 2 Dawn Minus abilities and still ending up even for the turn. Cons to this one, he is frequently just a 1k because your leader ability usually covers this ability, and you'll need this one only when you are trying to catch up after a second one, which isn't always something that you can hold on to these 1ks for. The next one we have, this one's a bit of an old one. This is the 5 cost, 6,000 power special Eustace Captain Kidd. He's got 1,000 counter and blocker. And your turn, once per turn, when a Dawn card from your field is returned to your Dawn deck, add 1 Dawn from your Dawn deck and set it as active. So just like with Frankie, except this one does not have to ever, it doesn't have, the timing's a lot easier because you just get it right away. This one also works pretty nicely with your leader ability, because if you find yourself in a spot where your opponent is ramping, this is the kind of card that lets you take advantage of their ramp by making your leader ability truly free and then letting you use your when attacking leader ability to catch up. Cons to this one, he has been power crept. This is not necessarily as strong of a card as we see nowadays, but he has a pretty unique effect that we don't see very often in the game, so it's one that I wanted to call out. The next one is similar to that, and this I would consider probably your extra copies of Kidd, because I think Kidd is probably the stronger card here. But this is the 3 cost 4,000 power wisdom attribute Charlotte Pudding, who has 1,000 counter, and your turn, once per turn, when a Dawn card on your field is returned to your Dawn deck, add up to 1 Dawn card from your Dawn deck and rest it. Just like with the other 2 cards that we've gone over, it works good in those decks that use Dawn -2 or 2 individual Dawn -1 abilities. You can play this out a little earlier than you would be able to play out at Blocker Kidd, and I would kind of treat this as extra copies of Blocker Kidd. Again, same downsides. This card doesn't necessarily impact the board as impactfully as some of the newer cards did. So keep that in mind. Next up, this would be one of the cards that you would probably look into using as an additional Dawn -1. This is the 4 cost 5,000 power / Trafalgar Law with counter 1,000. He has blocker, and on play Dawn -1. If your opponent has 7 or more cards in hand, you may trash 2 cards from their hand. So for those who haven't played with this card, the way it is worded, your opponent will spread out their hand for you. You don't get to see the cards, but you get to pick what they are. So this effectively is random discard, and it can be exceptionally good at messing with an opponent's game plan because they don't get to control what gets taken. So if you get lucky and randomly pull their next couple turns worth of plays, it can be absolutely backbreaking. Cons to this one is it definitely competes with the freeness of your leader ability. So you definitely want to run some number of cards that let you catch up in Dawn, in addition to your leader ability, which can be some kind of tension there. But definitely one that I'm interested in testing around with, because I do think that there may be something here with the extra Dawn minus abilities for the Sanji deck. Moving on to the next one, we have the 4 cost 5,000 power special 1k counter Reiju. She has on play if you have equal or less Dawn on your field than your opponent, and if you have 5 or less cards in hand, to draw 2 cards. Pros to this one, this is card advantage with board presence. So like Boof Burst doesn't get you board advantage, whereas this one is pretty easy to turn on. The downside being that sometimes getting to the 5 cards or less in hand can be a little bit tricky. So it's not a free add, but it is a very strong ability if you can. I will say that the equal or less Dawn is very easy in this deck to get active. So it's really a playstyle adjustment to make sure that you can get the 5 cards or less if you want to play this one. But I do think it's a very solid card if you work for it. Next up, we have the 5 cost 6,000 power special Don Quixote Rocinante. He's got 1k counter, and on play, you may trash one event from your hand, draw 2 cards. Perfectly good starting ability. Then he has, at the end of your turn, if you have 7 or more Dawn cards on your field, set up to 2 of your Dawn cards as active. Pros of this guy: you are running a lot of events most likely, so you can get rid of those random one-off tech events that don't make a difference in the current matchup. Just toss them into the trash and draw 2 more. Great card for that. You will almost always have Dawn for defense. If you aren't too greedy with your Dawn minuses, that end of turn ability will be active most of the game. Cons to this guy: he doesn't necessarily sway the board strongly in your favor, so you will have to battle on the ground with him because he doesn't remove anything. He's not a blocker. He's just kind of a beater on the board, which can be a liability when your cards don't do enough on the field and your opponent's doing more. So just something to keep in mind with him, but I think this is a very solid card. Possibly even move up to the tech thing over the spicy, but I wanted to put it here because I really wasn't sure how this one will play out in reality. Next one, this one is definitely on the spicy side. This is the 5-cost 6,000 power special 0 counter Senor Pink. He has on play Dawn -1, add up to 1 purple event with a cost of 5 or less from your trash to your hand, then set up to 1 of your Dawn cards as active. So the most important thing that this guy gets back is he gets back Gum Gum Giant. Being able to have more than 4 Gum Gum Giants in a game is a very big boon to the deck, especially because your leader ability lets you get out of this Dawn minus ability for free, and he sets the Dawn active for you so that you can use the Gum Gum Giant on your turn. Biggest cons to him: he is a brick, and he only works on purple events. So if you were running your Boof Bursts, and sometimes you just won't have a purple event in the trash yet. So that can be a pretty big downside, especially because Gum Gum Giants are the kinds of cards you play late, and you may not find an opportunity to get them in the trash so that he can get them back. Moving on to the next one, we have the 1-cost 1k attack Wisdom Nami with 1k counter, and when attacking, look at the top 5 cards from the top of your deck, reveal up to 1 blue event, and add it to your hand. Then place the rest of the bottom of your deck in any order. So this one is a pseudo blocker. Your opponents are really incentivized to swing into it because otherwise it's just going to draw you cards every turn. Cons to it is it only hits blue events, so it can never hit Gum Gum Giant. It can't hit Boof Burst, which then could draw you Gum Gum Giant, but that is kind of a chain of cards rather than just getting you Gum Gum Giant directly. This is one that I would consider focusing on more of maybe the Carne as ways of protecting it and really forcing your opponent to not swing into your life while you can kind of just accrue value with this Nami. This can be particularly good into leaders that don't play searchers or don't play things out to the board early, because you get to really kind of tax their leader and they have to swing their full 5s at a 1k that you just get to just let go after it's gotten value. So definitely one to keep in mind. Next up, this goes along with the Paraj Shot and the I'll Never Not Believe a Women's Tears. We have the Ivankov. He is a 3-cost 4,000 power special with 1k counter, and on play, reveal the top card of your deck. Play up to 1 2-cost character, then return the remaining cards to the top or bottom of your deck. And when attacking once per turn, if your hand has 6 or less cards, draw a card. This guy, if you can set him up, will usually draw you 2 cards. Cons to it is you need your whole deck built around it for the most part. I did not believe that this one would work in Marco very well, and I was wrong. And so I've learned to just never quite count this guy out, especially with the added synergy of the I'll Never Not Believe a Women's Tears ability, being able to do your 2 costs off the top for free. I think that there is very much potential for this one to be decent. And these are block 2, so these will stick around for a while. So I'm interested to see if anyone can make this one work. And we'll kind of go from there. Definitely a spicy one to watch, not necessarily one that I think has the tools it needs right now. But I would love to see somebody prove me wrong. All right, now getting on to kind of a sample list that I have one of my friends who, this is the list they play, and I've been playing it and felt pretty solid with it. Some suggestions based on this list of things you could change going into your own local meta. If you're facing a lot of aggro, Jet Culverin is really strong against aggro decks, so include a couple more of those maybe. If you're facing bigger bodies, include more red rocks. Only the one there means that once you've used the first one, you know that you can't find any more. Having a second one really lets you feel more free with the first one. If you're losing your Sanji a lot in combat, consider holding him for later in the game. He is not great against Zoro because of how easy it is to rest. That's the kind of matchup where you want to play him late and try to just get in damage with your leader early. And then the last one I'll suggest here, just as a suggestion, is don't hold on to Conquistor too long. Holding up one for multiple turns in a row just because your opponent's only swinging 5s at you is not usually a good use of your time. It's better to use it off of your leader ability just to draw a card, or just fire it off early to protect your life. Because it can only protect your leader, there are a lot of times in the end game where your opponents will not be swinging at your leader and you won't be able to get the use out of it. So if you just pitch it to draw a card that could be either a Gum Gum Giant to protect your guys, or a 2K, or even a 1K, there's a lot of cards that are better to have than a leader-only defensive event. So don't hold on to that one too long. So that's kind of a preview of where I'm at with Sanji right now. I will say that I am not feeling super confident into the meta I have been seeing online. I think Zoro is going to be a card, and even locally I know that there's several people who are probably going to play Green Zoro, which is going to be really hard to deal with. I've been learning the matchup a little bit better, but I think I need more time before I bring this one out to locals. So watch for that in the coming weeks, but probably not this week as I try to fine-tune the deck to really hone in on that Zoro matchup, because I think that it's going to be super common. But against the rest of the meta, you are very poor into Bonnie. If you're losing to Bonnie, that's okay. It's expected. I'm not even sure what the best way to tech into it is. I think I've seen people use Gravity Blade as a possible card. That's a very expensive card for the deck, but if it helps make that matchup a little better, maybe it's a card worth considering. You should be pretty good into Blackbeard, because a lot of your cards are hard to get rid of. You should be pretty good into Rayleigh, because you have access to Jet Culverin. You have good sticky blockers here that are easy to get online. Jozu can be good. Then you've got Boof Burst to bounce back stuff, Jet Culverin to remove stuff. Red Rock as a trigger is great to hit. You've got a lot of little things that can help make the Rayleigh matchup better. What other decks? Against Black, you should have a decent time. I haven't played enough against Black to fully get an experience for it, but just like with Blackbeard, you've got these cards that don't get removed very easily, and then you just get to accrue value through your leader and just kind of sculpting your hand into exactly the kinds of cards you need. Against Yellow, Enel is kind of tough. The Enel matchup focuses a whole lot on them getting to endgame healthy, and they will not swing at you. So they're going to be able to target a lot of your board with their big guys. Your focus should be in those yellow matchups, particularly against Enel, to get these guys down and protected, and then focus on really powering them up through the thing, trying to get down enough bodies to get lethal on them while using your leader ability to chip away at their life. Other than that, Jozu is a really good card, so make sure that you are playing around the idea of playing out Jozu early, even if that means breaking out a Kaya early. If you have your curve planned and you haven't seen your Jozu yet, sometimes it's correct to play out the Kaya, go card negative a little bit to find a Jozu to then recover the Kaya later, because Jozu is a very strong card. Otherwise, I think that's probably going to be it for this video. Thanks again for hanging out with me. I hope you guys enjoy my content, and I look forward to both playing this deck and talking with you guys about it in the future. But until next time, bye.